Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to Thursday's edition of the dceu Daily. Grace Randolph is no stranger to controversy, especially when talking about the DC Extended Universe. So let's check in the next chapter. Here's some more DCEU tea. They're auditioning. Hang on, tea? What? They're auditioning actors this month to take over the role of Cyborg in Flashpoint, and Andy Muschietti is heading up the search. I'd like to add that I think this is a huge mistake. If there are problems with Fisher that can't be worked out, that's unfortunate. But there are plenty of great DC characters of colour that could be used instead. Recasting is a really bad idea and will haunt this film. I don't think it's going to haunt this film, but let's just talk like this is true. I can't corroborate what she's saying, and I can't prove that what she's saying is a load of nonsense. So let's pretend what she's saying is true, despite her saying that in Birds of Prey there was going to be sausage picks in a diamond and that Wonder Woman 84 would do Flashpoint. None of those things happened, of course. There's another school of thought that when she broke those stories, they decided to reshoot and chuck those things out because of what she said and the response it brought. In fact, Grace Randolph could be a studio stooge for multiple studios where she says stuff on purpose to gauge the reaction from the audience. Don't disconnect that. She is a former actor in Hollywood, so she could be a studio stooge. Always remember that. Interestingly, she has had Zack Snyder on Beyond the Trailer as well, so she's definitely connected. But let's just say this is true. First of all, Grace, what difference does it make casting and bringing in another character of colour from DC if you need Cyborg? Without Ray, there's no Cyborg. They need a new Cyborg, right? Ezra Miller's The Flash name-dropped Victor Stone in the Crisis on Infinite Earths cameo he did with Grant Gustin. So they've been talking, they've been friends, they've been close since Justice League, right? That's what, that's the kind of hint here, right? So they need a replacement for Ray Fisher if that's the case. I'm going to go into Ray in a moment. And so this is really important. So this doesn't work. Now, some are talking about Joyavon Wade from Doom Patrol. Joyavon plays Victor Stone from another Earth. So he plays Cyborg from another Earth. So he can't come in and replace Ray Fisher. Now, I know that Ray said that actually Jeff Johns was threatening him with the Doom Patrol version of Victor Stone, aka Cyborg. But it's negligible. You can't do that because he is already Victor Stone. He is already Cyborg on another Earth. So no doubt he will cameo, and probably all of the Doom Patrol actors as well. So he's got his place in Flashpoint. So they need to recast. So do they need to recast? Is this true? Has the relationship between Ray Fisher and Walter Hamada gone beyond repair? Well, I think it's pretty obvious it has. When you come out and you expose private conversations between you and your boss, which is the head of DC Films, but he lets that go, and then months later you come out and call him a very, very dangerous enabler, you can absolutely guarantee that the relationship is dead. The only thing that could save this situation is if Walter and Ray meet in the middle and say, listen, things have been said. Maybe we've both made mistakes in our relationship, but for the movie, for the fans, for the projects, for the franchise, let's put those to one side and do this, and we can deal with our issues as we go on. Unless they do that, and I don't know if they're willing to, I think this is a serious issue. Now, I think Ray's just gone live on Instagram, by the way. By the way, I'm recording this video on Tuesday evening. Yes, that's how ahead of the curve I am. But basically, it seems like the relationship is dead, that there's no way. Now, Grace Randolph knows things, but also, as I said, she could be a studio stooge to gauge our reaction. So they can find out if it's acceptable to us for Ray to be replaced as Victor Stone, aka Cyborg. Of course, I desperately have always wanted to see Ray as Victor Stone again. In Flash, in the Flashpoint movie, which was always the plan from Zack and Deb Snyder anyway, back in the old days, part of the old regime. And I think originally this was the plan. Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, and Ben Affleck are all going to be in that film. So many different iterations from these DC characters will cameo in this film. It's a big, ambitious project that rewrites the franchise. So Ray was always meant to be involved. But Ray kept on pushing. You see, I supported Ray at first. When he came out and said the positive stuff he said about Joss Whedon wasn't true, I supported him. When he was pushing for an investigation at first, I supported him. But from the moment he exposed a private conversation between him and Walter Hamada, I wasn't. And what he said the other day about Walter is totally unforgivable. And it looks like the studio and Walter are feeling the same way. Walter Hamada came in as DC boss after Justice League, and he had to fix Aquaman, and he had to work with James Wan to make sure that film was on point. They needed that film to be a success. If that film wasn't a success, literally there will be no DC Extended Universe now. So it definitely seems like this story is true, or they're trying to gauge people's opinions. There's lots of people from the Snyderverse fandom threatening boycotts and things like that. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't think many of the Snyderverse fans will even watch this film, but they do have a problem if they're not planning on watching this film, because Batfleck's in it. So that puts them in a very, very difficult situation. And Cavill's Superman's going to be in it. I'm quite sure of that. And Gal Gadot's going to be in this as well. So, as I say, everyone from different iterations of DC live action will be involved in this film. It's a big film. It's a big moment. It's a very big moment in the history of DC live action. So let's just say what Randolph is saying here is true. And I believe it probably is true, because at the end of the day, Ray Fisher has been very venomous and public against Walter Hamada. So it's pretty obvious that he's done. And I said the other day when I reacted to his statement about Walter Hamada being a very, very dangerous enabler, I said that he was probably reacting to being sacked. It wouldn't surprise me if he was sacked there and then, and that's why he came on so venomously against Walter Hamada. So I think this is true. I think Grace is wrong. They can't just find another African-American DC Comics character and say, oh, well, this is not about representation and inclusion. This is about Victor Stone. This is about Cyborg and the DC Extended Universe needing one. And if Ray can't be involved, somebody does. Now, we have seen recasts before. We have seen it in Iron Man, right? And I forgot the character's name now, but, the one who becomes whatever. The guy. The character of colour, the actor of colour, who's basically Tony Stark's best mate. So they had one actor in the first film. Is it Trevor Howard or whoever it was anyway? And something Howard anyway. So they changed actors because Robert Downey Jr. didn't like him. Yeah, that's how serious that got. So there's actually been recast in comic book history before. The problem is Ray Fisher is very recognisable, and because of his statements and comments and fighting with Warner Brothers, everybody knows who he is. He did an excellent job in Justice League as Cyborg, as Victor Stone. There's no question about that. So I don't agree with Grace. I don't think there's anywhere else to go with this but a recast. They have to recast. We need Cyborg in this film because he's in Justice League. There's no escape from that situation. Now, I don't know if behind the scenes Zack Snyder can work his magic to bring Ray Fisher and Walter Hamada together. I don't know how Zack sees these things, if he even cares about this situation. I think that Ray Fisher has become a petty annoyance to everyone. As I say, at first, he was going public. He pressured the studio into doing the investigation. It was a good thing. But the targeting of Walter Hamada seems senseless to me, and I don't get it, seeing that Hamada wasn't even involved with Justice League. He was over at New Line Cinema doing his magic and doing an excellent job. And now you can really examine Walter Hamada's era of the DC Extended Universe. You can say, well, Aquaman is a brilliant film, which I believe it is. Shazam's really for children, but it works and it's okay. It's nothing special. It's not one of my favourites or anything. And then Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 84 obviously are somewhat problematic because they allowed those people to go in to do whatever they want. And the result, let's say, wasn't very successful. I'm in the middle of rewatching Birds of Prey, a really entertaining film if it isn't for its toxic commentary against men. If you can ignore that, you'll have a lot of fun with that movie. And so that's his record. But in terms of box office, it's pretty been neat and tidy. Aquaman making over $1 billion. Joker movie making over $1 billion. He was in charge of that film as well. Shazam making a little profit but doing really well for the little movie it was. And Shazam's not the biggest name in DC either. So they did well with that. And Birds of Prey made a small profit as well. It really should have done more, but the movie had problems. There's no question about that. And it was just before the pandemic too. But everything's negotiable. They got one flop, and that's Justice League, and that's nothing to do with Walter Hamada. So every Walter Hamada movie thus far has made a profit. You can magnify it again and say, well, basically, these movies are pretty self-contained, which is a shame, although David F. Sandberg did give us some great Easter eggs from BVS and MOS, which is brilliant, but mostly self-contained movies. So all of a sudden, that decision has changed, and we're going into the multiverse. There's going to be an arc. You know, it's very, very exciting. Just to leave Ray Fisher for a split second, just to come back to a story I was dealing with yesterday. So we had this whole thing where this journalist from the New York Times did this interview with Walter Hamada, and all this thing was coming out about, Michael Keaton's the new Batman for the DC Extended Universe. Batfleck is no more. And of course, this journalist come out and said, actually, that's not true. He didn't mean that. He meant that Michael Keaton's in Flashpoint. So it sounds like the studio privately have had a word with him, because maybe they have told him that, but maybe they decided they didn't need the heat right now. I don't know what's going on there. So that's what's going on with that. But when you read that New York Times article, most of it is assumptions and very few words from Walter Hamada. So it was a very weird interview in the first place. Just seems like a very, very desperate journalist, if you ask me. And sometimes in life, before we get triggered, just look at the quotes. What did Walter Hamada say? What did the journalist say? If you read it carefully, Walter Hamada says very few things in that piece, and it's mostly the faults and assumptions of the journalist. So that's where it becomes problematic. So it's not a WB hit piece. It was nothing like that. It was a stupid, idiotic journalist trying to make his name. So going back to Ray Fisher, it's inevitable he's done with the DC Extended Universe unless there can be peace talks, because it's so public, and we've heard what he last said about Walter. So it's just a complicated situation now, because he kept on pushing. Whether you agree with him or not, and mostly at first I did agree with him. I don't like personal insults, and I don't like people exposing other people's private conversations. This was, the studio will put up with him doing that to a point, but personal attacks against the head of DC Films will not be tolerated. It wouldn't be tolerated by anyone. If someone was working for me, or if we were on a set and filming something, and we had someone going around publicly saying what I do on a film set or a TV set, it would be a situation where I say, well, you're a great actor, mate, but I can't have you doing that. It's very similar to what Patty Jenkins has been doing now for a few weeks, which is exposing private moments between Warner Brothers and her during the first Wonder Woman and the second Wonder Woman. No need for it. And it's just coming from very, very bitter people. Now, I don't know what she's actually got to be bitter about. She's getting Wonder Woman free. I still think that announcement stinks. There's something that just doesn't smell right. Watch this space for that. But in terms of Ray Fisher, I think we can assume, unless something changes really dramatically, that he's done with the DC Extended Universe. And for me, I wanted nothing more than for him to be in Flashpoint with Ezra Miller. Those two had really, really good chemistry. Look, it's a shame. He made his point. He got his investigation. We're getting the Snyder Cut. Who knows if we're going to get more? There was no need for him to lead and keep on digging and digging. He went too far, and according to him, he doesn't care about losing his job. You know, he doesn't care about acting and things like that. Well, it's fine then, you know, do what you have to do, Ray. But it's a shame for the fans. You've stolen something from us, and, you know, Zack actually cast you. So you've stolen something from him as well. So very, very sad news there. Now, it's been reconfirmed by Zack Snyder, because he was talking with the Faruqi brothers, great guys on their YouTube channel, about actually shooting 2 versions of Justice League. Now, I think we've discussed this before, but because he's re-mentioned it, we'll talk about it a little bit. So what he's saying is he was filming what the studio wanted. He even said that they literally wanted him to put jokes in. So he was doing that while getting the actors to shoot his version as well. Look, it's a crazy scenario, and he says he's taking what he's shot, he's putting it into his new cut, if you want, and he's saying pretty much the cut's nearly 98, 99% done, so that's exciting as well. So he said that. So, look, it's all happening right now. As usual with the DC Extended Universe, for every positive thing we get a dozen negative things, and a lot of it is assumptions and bullshit. But we are where we are with this. You know, Ray Fisher made all these decisions, all these moves here. He could have kept his role, but he couldn't keep it shut. And now it's done. But, of course, I want to know what you think. So comment down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.